the edge of a new world.
It was a cold night in the late months of 1620. The Atlantic Ocean roared like a living beast, shaking the wooden ship Mayflower as if testing the courage of everyone aboard. The salty wind stung the skin, and the icy spray felt like needles. Among the passengers was a young man named Thomas Hale, a quiet scribe with sharp eyes and a restless mind. His younger sister, Alice Hale, sat beside him, shivering beneath a woolen cloak. They had left England for one reason: freedom of faith, freedom of life, freedom of thought. But the ocean demanded its price. A massive wave struck the ship, and Alice gasped in fear. "Thomas, this feels like a journey into death." Thomas smiled gently. "No, Alice. This is the doorway to a land where our children will live free, a land we will build with hope." Little did they know, that land would one day change the fate of an entire nation.
The birth of Boston.
After weeks of brutal travel, the passengers finally stepped onto the rocky shores of New England. Before them lay a wild, untamed land, thick forests, marshes, harsh winds, and cold soil. This was the place that would become Boston. Back then, it was known as the Shawmut Peninsula, home to the native Wampanoag people, who watched the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Thomas Hale and the others built small wooden homes, a modest church, and simple roads. They struggled through hunger, harsh winters, and unfamiliar land, but they survived. And slowly, the settlement grew. It grew houses, it grew families, it grew hope. And the name Boston took root, soft at first, then stronger, then unmistakable. A new city had been born.
The smell of ships, trade, and tea.
By the early 1700s, Boston had transformed into a lively seaport. The sound of creaking ships, sailors' calls, the smell of fresh lumber, and the breeze from the harbor created a world filled with movement and promise. Thomas Hale's family had become respected local citizens. His son, Jonathan Hale, was a trader known for his fairness and wisdom. He often taught neighborhood children about ships and sailing. One of those children was a lively boy named Samuel Adams. Jonathan would laugh and say, "Samuel, you have fire in your spirit. Never let anyone put it out." Samuel grinned mischievously. "A fire only dies when a man grows weak. I will not." Years later, that same boy would grow into the leader who ignited a revolution.
The first spark of resistance.
In 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, a law forcing colonists to pay taxes on every document, newspaper, license, and even playing cards. Boston erupted in anger. One evening, a group of young men gathered in a small tavern on Winter Street. Among them stood Samuel Adams, now a serious young thinker with fierce determination. "We are British subjects," he declared, "yet they treat us like slaves." Someone shouted, "This is not taxation, this is oppression." An elderly carpenter rose, his voice deep with resolve. "If we do not resist today, our children will live in chains tomorrow." That night, the first spark of revolution was born in the heart of Boston.
The blood-stained earth, the Boston Massacre.
A freezing evening in March 1770. Tension burst in the air like electricity. British soldiers patrolled the streets, and the people of Boston watched them with resentment and suspicion. At King Street, crowds gathered around a group of soldiers. Insults turned to shouting. Shouting turned to threats. Snowballs turned to stones. "Go back to your king. This is our land," young men yelled. The soldiers gripped their muskets nervously. The slightest mistake, and history would shift. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Fire!" No one knew who said it. But moments later, gunshots thundered. 5 colonists fell dead. Among them was Crispus Attucks, later remembered as the first martyr of the American Revolution. The next morning, Boston was silent, but inside every heart A storm was rising. Samuel Adams declared, "If they spill the blood of our people, we will break their empire." The tea storm, the Boston Tea Party, a dark night in December 1773. The moon hid behind clouds as if unwilling to witness what was about to happen. 3 ships filled with British tea waited at Boston Harbor, tea forced upon the colonists. Anger had reached its limit. More than 100 men disguised themselves as Mohawk natives and climbed aboard the ships. Among them was Daniel Hale, grandson of Thomas Hale. His hands trembled slightly, but his heart was steady. A friend whispered, "Are you afraid, Daniel?" Daniel shook his head. "You cannot fight for liberty if you fear it." Then came the moment. Crates cracked open. Tea spilled into the black water. The harbor filled with a strange scent, the scent of rebellion. History would call this night the Boston Tea Party. It was not just a protest, it was a declaration.
The drums of war.
In 1775, British forces tightened their grip on Boston. The city suffered shortages of food, freedom, and hope. Nearby towns, Lexington and Concord, became the grounds where the first shots of the American Revolutionary War were fired. Daniel Hale stood on the shore, watching British ships move like ghosts in the fog. He remembered his grandfather's words, "Son, freedom always demands blood, but its fruits shade generations." The war had begun.